Pope Francis is back home at the Vatican following more than a month of hospitalization, and the Rupnik scandal reemerges, while Cardinal Robert McElroy speaks out against President Trump's immigration policy. Here with analysis of all of this and more is the Papal Posse. Editor-in-Chief of theCatholicThing.org, Robert Royal, and canon lawyer and priest of the Archdiocese of New York, Father Gerald Murray. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. I want to start with the biggest news of the week, Pope Francis's first public appearance in over a month, followed by his discharge from the Gemelli Clinic to continue his recovery at the Casa Santa Marta in the Vatican. Here's Pope Francis from Sunday, March 23rd.
Sì, a tutti. E vedo questa signora con I fiori gialli. Che brava.
Father, your thoughts on the Pope's appearance on Sunday. Did it send the reassuring message that the Vatican had hoped? And then I want to talk about the end of the appearance there.
No, it was concerning to see how difficult it was for the Holy Father to speak. He could just say a couple of sentences. At the end, when he gave the blessing, it was concerning to see he really couldn't raise his right hand and make the full sign of the cross. Or, he looked weak. When he finished the whole thing, you could see kind of a distress in his face. I think he has great difficulty breathing. And I think, being in the bed and in a chair for so long has caused, his muscle tone to go way down. So he's got a long recuperation.
And they took the oxygen. They obviously removed the oxygen, Father. And during that 2-minute appearance at the window, when they pulled the wheelchair back, you could see him gasping for air, and then he closed his eyes. It was obviously an enormous struggle for him to come out even for a few minutes.
Yes, and the oxygen was back on when he was in the car to take him back to the Vatican. So, no, I see him as really needing basically total rest and recuperation for the next couple of months to reestablish his strength and, to be able to have control, over his body, to be able to move more freely and to be able to speak more freely. It's going to take time and a lot of physiotherapy and the like.
Yeah. Bob, there was that moment, we showed it, where he recognized this lady who's in the front row there in front of the Gemelli Clinic. Carmela Mancuso is her name, who is holding a bouquet of flowers. He greeted, her in front of the crowd. She has a history of bringing flowers to the Pope at various audiences. But I noticed on the Vatican camera, they cut away to her, and it seemed as if whoever was pushing the Pope, whispered to him to make sure to notice her and give the sign of the cross. Did this feel a bit staged to you?
Well, maybe it is, but in another way, too, it's a moment when I think every Catholic has to feel some sense of solidarity with the Pope. I mean, he's a real tough guy. We've learned this week that he told the doctors when they were perhaps ready to give up on him, let's not give up. So, I mean, you see that, and a lot of people were praying for him. And look, even if it was somewhat staged, for me, it was a moment at which, in spite of everything that we'd heard about over the past few weeks, it's a moment of respite. And let's just say it was something beautiful that a Catholic appreciating a Pope was honored in that way.
The director of Santa Marta House, where the Pope lives, Monsignor Battista Rica, who some might remember famously for the "Who am I to judge" comment, which came from his appointment. He announced this week that Pope Francis will remain isolated in his bedroom for at least 2 months as he continues to recuperate. What does that isolation mean in this case? I mean, one wonders if he, is he going to have visitors as he did at Gemelli? What does this look like?
Well, I think according to what I've read, that his top aides, Cardinal Parolin and Archbishop Peña-Parra, will be the go-betweens between the Pope and his secretary and his medical staff and the rest of the Curia and the world. So this is going to be an unusual period of any pontificate, but certainly of this. If there was any pope who was out in front of the media and giving interviews and meeting all kinds of people, it was Pope Francis. Now we're going to rely on these intermediaries I think it's going to be difficult for the Pope to be isolated because, he loves the energy that he gets from being out among the people. But let's see what happens because, there are a lot of things going on in the next 3 months in the life of the Church. And let's see what the level of energy and activity the Pope is going to engage in through his intermediaries.
Bob, there was an op-ed written from the hospital. Appointments went forward. But to give people a bit of context, here in the United States, the Apostolic Nuncio was presiding at the Mass of Consecration for the new Archbishop of Detroit this week, and he announced that the Pope was unable to sign the bull of appointment due to his illness. The Nuncio issued one of his own while assuring the world that it was all legal. Let me start with Father on this one. Is it legal, Father? And then I'll go to Bob.
Yes, it is. Nuncios have the power to make presentation of new archbishops based on a decree that was issued by the Vatican a number of years ago. So that canonically, you're the bishop of the diocese once you get named by the Pope, and we certainly know he was named. The presentation of the bull and the massive installation is really a formality in the long run.
Bob, your thoughts on this, though, because it is indicative that the Pope really couldn't even bring himself to sign a bull, and it's no surprise that the Pope's planned meeting with King Charles will be postponed. Your thought about this isolation we could be looking at over the next 2 months at least?
Yeah, I think medically it's going to be very dicey because he cannot risk having another infection, and he was treated with very, very serious drugs. I asked a doctor of my acquaintance, and she told me that just the antibiotics alone can have terrible effects on your kidneys and on your bone marrow and other things. So he's got to be very careful that doesn't happen. And of course, there are other possible, knock-on consequences down the line. But look, this raises a very serious question because some people have been joking that this is sort of the auto pen that people joke about with Joe Biden, but transferred into the Vatican. Some people say the auto plume, that might be here. And we do have to be assured that what we're going to be hearing coming out of the Vatican is in fact coming from the Pope himself, if that's the way it's being presented. So there are two sides of this. I think there's the medical side, and then there's the administrative side. And you always hear from people, I hear this from the Swiss Guards, I hear this from other people who are involved in the Vatican, that you can try to limit what the Pope is going to do and who he's going to see, but at the end of the day, he's the Pope, and he's going to want to do what he can do, and it's very hard to say no to him. So there's going to be a bit of drama over the next few months.
Yeah, and let's get into some of this drama. I mean, one of his physicians, Dr. Luis Carbone, his nurse, Massimiliano Strapetti, his pre-secretary, Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez, and Pietro Parolin, the Secretary of State, they're all part of that inner circle. Father, what do you expect to see regarding church business that is being done in the weeks and months ahead? I mean, how much assurance do we have that this is actually coming from the Pope?
Well, we have to assume that it is coming from the Pope because the Vatican machinery is operating on that basis. Now, the question is, who's telling all the people operating that machinery that the Pope wants this or that? Certainly with the nomination of bishops, that's continued on right through the period of the papal hospitalization. In fact, today we got the nomination of the new Bishop of Cordoba, Spain. And that was a big deal because he's only been retired about 6 weeks, he sent in his letter. So that was acted on quickly. Now, we have a number of archbishops in the United States who are over the retirement age of 75. So it's going to be interesting whether, for instance, the cardinal who is in prefect of the dicastery for bishops is Cardinal Prevost. Will he be conducting the usual weekly meetings or frequent meetings that he had with the Pope for nominations? Or will all of that go through Cardinal Parolin? I'm going to suspect that. But, we have the Synod on Synodality progress going on. There are all kinds of scheduled meetings happening. We have the Holy Year of Hope. So this is a big question mark. And, my goal, or my hope rather, would be that we would be kept informed on the state of progress of the Pope's activities and that we would be able to see him. Hopefully he can do his weekly Angelus on Sundays. Either by recording or personally if he can't leave his room. So, I think it's up to the Vatican to assure people that, yes, the Pope is in charge, he knows what he's doing, and he's doing it consciously with the aid of people such as Cardinal Parolin.
But Bob, despite the vague updates provided by the Vatican during Pope Francis's hospitalization, we now know just how precarious his condition was. The Pope's physician, Dr. Sergio Alfieri, admitted that he and his team considered stopping treatment to Pope Francis when he came very close to death due to the condition he found himself in around February the 28th. Here's the quote: "We had to choose whether to stop and let him go or to force and try with all possible drugs and therapies, running the very high risk of damaging other organs." Now, Bob, I don't think this surprises anyone, but your thoughts on the stark reality of what was actually happening there in the hospital and what the Vatican was reporting over the 38-day stay.
Yeah, I thought that this was very revelatory. We had no sense that the doctors themselves were kind of thinking that, maybe we shouldn't just let him continue to suffer needlessly. And even as they were letting us know that he had those two very serious episodes. It was striking to me that this doctor, who seems to be a sober fellow, I like the way he handled the interviews with a couple of the Italian journals. He describes what happened as miracle. He said that, when you hear a doctor say that it's a miracle that my patient recovered, when he's a medical man, a scientist, it tells you actually how very serious they thought it was. We had no idea. We knew that it was serious. We had no idea that it was that degree of seriousness that they were having to decide life and death, literally at the time. But two miracles, and there were an awful lot of people praying for the Pope. And let's hope that in the weeks and months to come, we get the best possible outcome for the Holy Father that we can possibly get at this point.
Father, the attending physician there mentioned the risk of organ damage and failure because of the therapies that the Pope was subjected to. One wonders what effect this will have on the Pope's system, and how will we know?
Well, I mean, that's what the speculation's going to be based on, what we've learned so far, and then people compare that with the video that we saw of the Pope coming out on the balcony. He was in great distress with having spoken briefly, and again, he doesn't seem to have much strength. So, what is that a result of? We have, I hope that there will be some medical indications over time, because this isn't curiosity. People want to know other people's business. No, the Pope is the leader of the Catholic Church. We pray for his health and recovery, but the public needs to be reassured that he is in fact able to carry out these tasks, and that's, I think, a responsible public relations strategy from the Holy See would be more information, not less.
Yeah, no, this is going to be a very interesting and potentially perilous moment for the credibility of the Vatican, depending on how the Pope's health progresses, if he recovers, if he has a setback, and what information is shared with the public, because all of that will point to the credibility of anything we hear coming out of the Vatican. But gents, from the scandal that won't go away department, the Marko Rupnik affair, that disgraced Jesuit, continues to develop. The Jesuit order is now offering monetary reparations to the 20 women who have said publicly they were sexually, psychologically, and spiritually abused by Father Rupnik. The superior of the Jesuits issued a statement this week saying Rupnik had stubbornly refused to publicly accept responsibilities for his actions and was then expelled from the order. Father, how does this man remain a priest, and what happened to zero tolerance?
Those are great questions, Raymond. We've been talking about this for, a year and a half since it was announced that the Vatican would undertake a formal investigation by waiving the statute of limitations, which had been done in many other cases. So the fact that it wasn't done in Rupnik's case was made suspicious because of his friendship with the Pope. But what do we have now? A year and a half later, Cardinal Fernandez said he's having trouble getting judges to sit on the tribunal. Cardinal Fernandez, with a little due respect, there's a very simple way. You simply call 3 canon lawyers and said, the Holy Father's named you judge in this case, report to Rome a week from now to sit in this trial. Apparently, the prosecutors are ready to go. This has been slow walking, and now the Jesuit action confirms what everybody knows, The evidence against this former Jesuit, still a priest, but former Jesuit, the evidence is overwhelming. The credibility of the witnesses has been tested and shown to be true. So, you know, zero tolerance for criminal behavior by priests is a minimum. We also have to have accountability by the hierarchy to say we will enforce the law in a timely manner for very good reasons, so that this man can't parade around the world, claim that his victims are maligning him, and then say, well, by the way, I'm a great artist and let me keep making artworks for churches. His artwork should be stripped from every church they're in, because they're an indignant reminder of the evil this man has propagated by the fact that he was allowed to go so long under the condition of having nuns under his spiritual care, and he abused them. I mean, this is a horrible case. It needs to be solved very quickly.
Bob, why do you think this is being slow-walked? I mean, Cardinal Fernandez claims he's finalized a list of judges, but they haven't appointed anybody for the canonical trial. And I guess the question is he being protected, Bob, a la Theodore McCarrick?
Well, there has to be something of that nature, obviously, isn't it? The head of the Jesuits actually said that the Jesuits are feeling uncomfortable with this situation of Rupnik, and that's why that they were offering, without giving us too many details, they were offering this compensation to these victims. Look, this, I think we have to say, it goes ultimately back to Pope Francis, because this is a major scandal. It's a global scandal that everyone is absolutely aware of. While he was in the hospital, the Holy Father issued a statement asking that the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors to work more closely with the Roman Curia. And from what we can tell from news reports, they were outraged because they've been trying to do this for years, they said, and they got no response. In fact, they got resistance from many members of the Curia. So there seems to be a kind of a network. We don't know exactly who it belongs to this, but no one seems to want to dig into this the way it obviously needs to be dug into. And it ultimately has to go back to the Holy Father, because he himself had to intervene to allow the statute of limitations to be waived. And it isn't hard, as Father rightly says, it isn't hard to tell people, please move forward with this. This is having a deleterious effect against our credibility as a church that really wants to deal with this problem of abuse. It's easy to fix, it ought to be done, and every day that goes by, it looks worse and worse for the Pope and for the Church.
Father, I want your take on this as well, because just this week, and this is what it makes you want to rend your garments and scream to the heavens, just this week, the Vatican News, again, on their official website, they've got Rupnik's trash art featured there on major holy days. And then you've got the Pope sending out this letter to the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors, as Bob just mentioned, to promise to work more closely with the Curia. Well, where were they? Where have they been? And I mean, it seems they're pretty impotent when it comes to somebody like Rupnik and some of these other notorious cases of malefactors that were close to the Pope.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous to say that the Pontifical Commission for Protection of Safe Spices and all that, whatever its official name is, that they need to cooperate with the Curia. Why is the Dicastery for Communications using the artwork of a man who was excommunicated, restored, now thrown out of the Jesuits? We know he wouldn't cooperate with the Jesuits in their investigation. And now he's roaming the world as a priest in good standing, while a year and a half later, they're still waiting to constitute a tribunal. The Dicastery for Communication should hang its head in disgrace, because Rupnik's artwork doesn't have to be on anything they put out. That's a choice they made. They're communications. They know what the world thinks of this. I would like them to have the victims of Rupnik come to their offices and them to give a rational explanation why Rupnik's art is worthy of a Vatican website. There is no, it's not. This is a terrible, terrible thing that they're doing.
No, it's a hideous slap in the face to every victim and an insult to the faithful. who look in on this. And I agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, the Vatican is the ultimate patron of the world's art and the cultural heritage of the Western tradition. Surely there's a picture of St. Joseph that they can find in the archives better than what Rupnik has offered. Okay, I got to move on to this just before we run out of time. A couple of U.S.-based stories. The Diocese of El Paso, Texas, led by Bishop Mark Seitz, he's chair also of the Migration Committee for the USCCB. He held a march for migrants and refugees, calling the White House's immigration initiatives a war on the poor. And in his first public address in Washington, Cardinal Robert McElroy, the new cardinal there, criticized the Trump administration for tightening the southern U.S. border and freezing financial aid to Catholic NGOs. Bob, your thoughts? Why are the U.S. bishops inserting themselves into what really, in many cases here, are purely political questions?
Yeah, I am particularly disturbed when they start using this language of war. We know what kind of violence is tending to bubble up right now in the society. And I would encourage them to get away from that language. Cardinal McElroy himself has also talked about a war of fear and terror against these immigrants. And you rightly say, I mean, it's very difficult to see what their role ought to be in determining what the immigration policy should be. Look, I'm willing to say this. People who have been here for many years, 10 years or more, whatever it is, we bear a certain moral responsibility that we've let them live here for so long, and we really would be disrupting lives if we pulled them out. But for the more recent people that have arrived here, and certainly for the people who are known criminals, just today, in the county where I live in Northern Virginia, one of the three leaders of the MS-13 was picked up by ICE and is in custody and will probably be deported. He's a Salvadoran who's here illegally. I mean, certainly our bishops could come out and try to nuance this situation. Instead of talking about war, talk about how, of course, we need to get rid of criminals who are harming Americans. Of course, Kristi Noem has the right to say, look, to the recent arrivals, you should go home. We'll respect that decision, and we'll give you the opportunity to apply the way other immigrants have applied. But to just use this blanket language as if they are opposed ideologically to what our president, who is a duly elected authority on these issues, to just do that, I think they've stepped out of their role, and they're being ideological in a way that's only going to come back to haunt them.
Father, I only have a minute, but your thoughts on this, particularly that rhetoric of war, when you're talking about MS-13 and the way that these guys call hits, rape and traffic young girls. I mean, your thoughts?
Yeah, law enforcement is not waging war. Law enforcement is protecting the community. People who enter the country illegally know that they're in jeopardy from the moment they violate the law and do that. Gang members who come up here to facilitate criminal behavior and to associate with other criminals, they're an even worse problem because they're here to positively harm society, rob, steal, murder, and rape. Seizing these people, and remember the administration says we're starting with rounding up known criminals. That's not a war on anybody. That's a law enforcement operation. Now, as Bob said, people here illegally and are in jeopardy because they also can be deported. They should leave voluntarily and get online. For me, it's stunning. Let's say 100 people showed up at the bishop's headquarters today and said, guess what, we live here now. Open the door, and if not, we'll break it down. We're going to go in, we got cots, we're going to stay here, we got food. And if you try to remove us, you're declaring war on us and you're acting unjustly. No bishop would say that. So why, if the bishops can evict people who illegally go into their headquarters, why can't the country as a whole say, look, you're here illegally, and particularly if you're a criminal, you got to leave. And if you won't leave voluntarily, we're going to compel you to leave by arresting you. I have no problem with that. Now, Bob's point is good. If the government is so lassitudinous and let people stay for 10, 20 years without anything, we should make an arrangement for them in all fairness because they've established roots in the community. But you can't just say any movement to get rid of any illegal alien, particularly criminal ones, is a war. No, that's not true.
Yeah, or that border enforcement is a war on the poor. No, that's a protection of the citizens and the common good, in my eyes. I'm glad we're all in agreement, gentlemen. We will leave it there. For commentary by Robert Royal and Father Gerald Murray, visit thecatholicthing.org. Thank you both.